Hello, I'm Patricia, a 32-year-old. My early years were shadowed by the loss of my mother, a wound that deepened my bond with my father, who single-handedly ensured my every need was met. This profound loss made me cautious about my emotions, and for a long time I thought I might remain single. But then I met Peter, a caring and persistent gentleman who is now 34. We were introduced by a friend who was concerned about my prolonged singlehood. After a year of gentle courtship, Peter proposed. Now, as we prepare for our upcoming wedding, I recall a distressing incident at our wedding reception. My in-laws, under the influence and oblivious to the murmurs of the crowd, confronted me publicly. They demanded that I prove my financial worth to the family by contributing $5,000 monthly as an additional support, which is half my salary, asserting that it was too late for objections since I was already marrying into their family. I was stunned by their audacity to voice such demands at what should have been a celebratory event. As I stood there, my face drained of color, my father intervened. Taking the microphone from them, he sternly reprimanded my in-laws, reminding them of the embarrassment they were causing themselves. This episode not only shocked me, but also reinforced the cautious approach I've always taken with my relationships. Despite the love and support from my father and Peter, navigating these family dynamics has been a new challenge for me. Peter and I began dating, and from the start, his kindness and attention made me truly happy. He became so significant in my life that I couldn't help but envision a future together. When he proposed, it was clear we were on the same path. Peter always knew just what to say to ease my doubts. "Don't worry if you're uncertain about something. I'll be here for you until you feel better. I love you, Patricia. You can always rely on me," he would assure me. His promises and presence brought a comforting warmth that only deepened my affection for him. When I shared the news of our engagement with my dad, his joy overflowed. He even shed tears. "Wow, Patricia, you're finally tying the knot. I'm over the moon for you," he exclaimed. We shared a lighthearted moment when I teased him for being so dramatic, a side of him I rarely saw. "I used to worry you might never settle down," he admitted. It was a surprise to hear his concerns, but it only showed his deep care for me. His warm congratulations meant everything, especially knowing the sacrifices he'd made raising me alone. As Peter and I dove into wedding planning, our lives were a whirlwind of activity. Our jobs filled our weekdays, and weekends were dedicated to organizing our big day. Free time became a rare luxury. Eventually, we found a day to visit Peter's parents for the first time since our engagement. Despite our hectic schedules, we were eager to visit happen. As we arrived at his parents' house, nerves fluttered in my stomach. Peter noticed and reassured me with a comforting smile. "Don't worry, my parents are really kind." His words eased my anxiety slightly as I rang the doorbell. It was Peter's mother who greeted us. "Mom, I'm home," Peter announced cheerfully. "Welcome home, Peter. It's so nice of you to come," she responded warmly to him. I followed with a polite introduction. "Nice to meet you. I'm Patricia, Peter's fiancée." Her initial warmth towards Peter cooled somewhat as she turned to me. The smile she offered was polite but lacked the warmth she had shown her son, and her gaze held a hint of scrutiny. This subtle shift in demeanor left me feeling slightly uneasy as we stepped inside. Peter's mother guided us into the living room, where her reserved manner persisted. With a tone more interrogative than conversational, she began, "Patricia, I'm curious about what you bring to the table. Peter is our treasure, our only child. If you're going to marry him, you must be suitable. Are you worthy of him?" Her directness caught me off guard. I hadn't expected such a frosty reception from my future mother-in-law, and found myself struggling to respond. "Remember, you'll be joining our family. Are you prepared for that?" she continued. While marrying Peter indeed meant becoming part of his family, the high expectations she placed on me seemed unreasonable. Peter's family wasn't a prominent or influential dynasty, and I wasn't even going to live with them. I disliked the pressure of these questions. As I pondered a response, she grew impatient with my hesitation and sharply scolded. "When I ask you a question, answer promptly. You're being rude." Her voice escalated as she pressed, "I want to know if you're ready for this." Feeling overwhelmed, I managed to reply, "I hope that Peter and I will support each other in our marriage." Her response was dismissive. "That's such a naive thing to say. Your job as a wife is to support Peter. You clearly don't understand the basics." Peter's father, sitting nearby, intervened. "Honey, please calm down. He apologized to me." "I apologize, Patricia. I hope you weren't too upset by my wife's words." "It's okay," I replied, trying to keep composed. I understood that Peter's mother was protective of her son and might have spoken out of haste. Just then, Peter's brother entered the room. His gentle tone momentarily eased my nerves until he added, "What my wife says has some truth to it. What concerns me is that you come from a single-parent family." Confused and a bit hurt, I asked, "What do you mean by that?" "Well, being raised by just one parent doesn't have a good public image. We can't exactly be thrilled about someone from such a background becoming our son's wife, can we?" he elaborated. At that moment, I couldn't hold back. "Wait a minute. What's wrong with being raised by a single parent? My father worked incredibly hard to raise me alone. I am ungrateful for my upbringing and proud of my father. Growing up with one parent doesn't diminish my worth." The room fell into a tense silence as I stood my ground, feeling the weight of their judgments yet firm in my values. Peter's parents had an old-fashioned perspective that was apparent as they questioned my capability to be a good wife, citing my upbringing as a single parent. They expressed doubts about whether I had learned the essential skills like managing household chores. I responded with conviction. "I help my father a lot with household chores. I can also cook pretty well, so please don't make assumptions about me." Despite my clear explanation, they seemed to dismiss my words and proceeded to lay down conditions for our marriage. "We'll allow you to marry Peter, but in return, you must promise to prioritize us because we are Peter's parents. Can you promise us that?" they demanded. I was taken aback by their request. It felt more like a transaction than a blessing. Later that evening, I felt sidelined by their dominating attitude and decided to share my concerns with Peter. "Hey, Peter, do your parents always talk to people like that?" I asked, hoping for some understanding. Peter seemed unfazed. "What's wrong with how they talk?" I was surprised that Peter didn't recognize the issue. "I mean, the way your parents talked to me and what they said," I explained further. Peter dismissed it casually. "Oh, really? They were just discussing whether you're ready for marriage." I understand they're concerned, but I felt like their comments were a bit too much. I persisted. Peter's casual response surprised me. "Really? What do you think they said wrong? They'd given us their blessing, so let's not dwell on it." Though I agreed outwardly, "Yeah, you're right," inside, I couldn't shake off the unease that Peter seemed to align more with his parents than with me. It was deeply troubling. Sensing my discomfort, Peter tried to reassure me, pulling me into a hug. "Patricia, you don't have to worry so much. My parents are just a bit upset because their only son is getting married," he explained. Though Peter's words were meant to comfort me, they didn't fully alleviate my feelings of being misunderstood and somewhat alone in this new family dynamic. I was left wondering how we would navigate our future together with such different expectations from his parents. Peter tried to ease the tension by suggesting his parents simply wanted what was best for us. They just want us to have a strong marriage like theirs, and that's why they might have come off a bit harsh, he explained. I tried to see things from his perspective, acknowledging that perhaps they held high expectations for us. Nevertheless, I couldn't shake off the discomfort caused by their criticism of my upbringing. I believe that our marriage should be about us and our mutual respect, not solely about seeking their approval. As I grappled with these thoughts, the wedding day arrived. It was a profoundly emotional moment to walk down the aisle with my father, who had raised me by himself. As Peter and I exchanged vows and rings to the sound of applause, I felt an overwhelming joy, realizing the significance of the commitment we were making. At the reception, the lively atmosphere and the congratulations from friends and colleagues made it a truly memorable day. Despite the initial misgivings about Peter's parents, the joy of the day made me glad we had gone through with our plans. After the ceremony, we looked forward to officially registering our marriage. The day was filled with cherished moments, but as we prepared to greet our guests, I noticed Peter's parents were visibly intoxicated, their behavior slightly erratic, which made me uneasy. During the reception, an uncomfortable moment unfolded when Peter's mother, a bit too forcefully, pulled me aside and in a commanding tone said, "Patricia, listen to me. After this wedding, you are going to dedicate yourself entirely to us. Get ready because we will test you rigorously." Some guests chuckled, thinking it was a joke. Shortly after, Peter's father took the microphone, glanced at me, and remarked, "Patricia, aren't you ashamed to wear a dress like that? It doesn't suit you at all." His tone was sharp, and Peter's mother added, "Dear, you should tell her the truth." The mood among the guests shifted. Whispers grew louder, some in disbelief, others in discomfort. I turned to Peter, hoping for his support, expecting him to address his parents' rude remarks. However, to my dismay, he remained silent, later saying he couldn't do anything about it and didn't believe his parents were in the wrong. This response was disheartening. It made me realize the challenges we might face as a couple, especially regarding his parents' influence and our differing perspectives on handling family conflicts. As we moved through the day, I knew this issue would need more discussion and understanding if we were to build a strong, unified future together. In the wedding hall's bustling atmosphere, a harsh reality struck me. Peter would not shield me from his parents' harshness in the future. The situation escalated quickly when my in-laws, under the influence and unabashed, continued to berate me with unreasonable demands. "Well, you're married now, but to be part of this family, you need to prove you have enough money," they announced, adding, "After you register your marriage, you should give us a few thousand a month and your entire bonus." Their words left me stunned. Such audacious demands at our wedding reception were the last thing I expected. As I stood there, my face pale, my father stepped in, his voice firm yet respectful as he took the microphone from them. "Enough of this. Don't you realize how inappropriate this is?" he challenged. Peter's parents shot back defiantly. "Why are you interrupting us while we're talking?" They sneered further. "I knew this woman's father was no good. Single parents are never any good." Angered by their cruel words toward my father, I felt my temper rising, but my father remained composed and responded, "You're even worse than I thought. Refusing to meet me just because I'm a single father is shameful." I never expected such bigotry from people associated with a respected figure. "I assume President Donald's employees would be more decent," my father continued. The mention of President Donald seemed to startle my father-in-law. "How do you know President Donald?" he asked, his tone shifting to one of concern. "He's a business partner of my company and, more importantly, an old friend of mine," my father clarified. He then added, "And speaking of single parents, President Donald himself was raised by his mother alone, so your comments have inadvertently insulted the president of the company you work for." As realization dawned on their faces, the gravity of their blunder became apparent. My father-in-law's demeanor changed drastically, from assertive to pleading as he dropped to his knees. "I apologize, sir. Please don't mention this to the president," he begged. His earlier bravado evaporated in the face of potential consequences. This sudden shift in their attitude marked a turning point in the evening, highlighting not only the thoughtlessness of their earlier remarks, but also the underlying respect my father commanded. As the night continued, I was left contemplating the complex dynamics of our newly extended family and the role I would choose to navigate within it. Amid the unfolding drama, my father-in-law looked utterly defeated, and the guests couldn't help but react, some with laughter, others capturing the moment on their phones. My dad, standing by his principles, replied firmly, "Apologies can't undo what's been said." He then approached me, asking quietly if I wanted to leave with him. I nodded, taking the microphone from Peter's hand. "Thank you all for the entertainment, but there will be no wedding," I announced resolutely to Peter, his parents, and all the guests at the reception. "I will ensure that the gifts and contributions for this occasion are returned." With those final words, I exited the hall alongside my father. As we left, I caught a glimpse of Peter and his parents, their faces marked by dismay, while their relatives quickly gathered around them, expressions filled with concern. The repercussions of that night were immediate. As I returned the gifts and explained the situation, many guests expressed their sympathy and commended my father and me for taking a stand against such unacceptable behavior. They appreciated our integrity in not allowing ourselves to be manipulated by such offensive demands. The incident didn't just leave a personal mark, it rippled through Peter's professional life as well. Colleagues who had attended the wedding began to view him differently, tarnishing his reputation due to his inability to defend me against his parents' unreasonable actions. The embarrassment became so overwhelming that Peter felt compelled to resign from his position. Moreover, the president of the company where my father-in-law worked got wind of the fiasco. The fallout was severe. Peter's father was demoted and transferred to a less prestigious role in a remote countryside office. Peter's family also faced social repercussions, becoming somewhat ostracized by their relatives due to the scandal. It was a regrettable series of events, but sometimes the consequences of one's actions are unavoidable. In the aftermath, I've been focusing on rebuilding and strengthening my relationship with my dad. We've been spending more quality time together, finding solace and reinforcement in each other's company after navigating such turbulent waters. The recent upheaval in my personal life has brought me even closer to my father, deepening my appreciation for everything he's done for me. One day, he invited me for a heart-to-heart conversation that took an unexpected turn. "Patricia, have you ever considered taking over the business?" He asked, his face a canvas of hope and earnestness. Caught off guard, I hesitated. "Are you suggesting?" I trailed off, unsure of where he was leading the conversation. He smiled slightly. "Why don't you work towards becoming the president of my company?" It was a significant proposal, and from his tone, it was clear he believed I was ready for the challenge. "I'll do my best," I promised, a flurry of excitement and nervousness swirling within me. After reflecting on my recent experiences, I decided to focus on advancing my career at my dad's company, setting aside romantic pursuits for the moment. I aimed to prove to both myself and my father that I could excel and perhaps even become a great leader like him. Currently, I am fully committed to learning all aspects of the business. The work is demanding but immensely rewarding, and I'm eager to embrace every opportunity that comes my way. The ordeal at the wedding underscored just how unreasonable Peter's parents were, turning what should have been a beautiful celebration into a spectacle. Fortunately, since the marriage was never legally finalized, I avoided a potentially disastrous entanglement. Now free from marital commitments and in-law complications, I can concentrate solely on my professional ambitions. It's liberating to have found such clarity after a tumultuous period. I'm optimistic about the future and thrilled about the prospect of leading the company one day. Thank you for taking the time to follow my story to its conclusion. If you found something meaningful in it, please consider subscribing. I look forward to sharing more updates and insights with you in the future.